In this game, Magnus Carlsen broke every opening chess rule to then win the game against the number 18 player in the world in 18 moves. Carlsen was playing white and he opens up with the queen's pawn move. Duda, the number 1 Polish grandmaster, responds with knight to f6, and the first few moves are casual, that's the queen's gambit. However, here Carlsen trades in the center and then solidifies, and after a couple more trades in the center and queen to c7 played by black, hitting this pawn on c3, here is when interesting things begin to happen. Now, in this position, how would you play here if you were white? Well, I'm pretty sure that most players would guard this pawn on c3 one way or the other, for example, by playing something like, like this, bishop to d2. Now, however, Carlsen just ignores this weakness on c3, which also checks his king, and just plays the rook move rook to b1. Now, that is the first interesting surprise. Duda actually hesitated and ultimately did not capture this pawn on c3. Now, why didn't he capture it? Well, it turns out that after queen takes c3, Carlsen wanted to play bishop d2, gaining one tempo, pushing the queen back, and after this he just gains quite a solid lead in development. He's got a bunch of pieces into play, while black is just having this dancing queen, and that feels quite dangerous. In the actual game, Duda played knight to d7, kind of testing waters and seeing if Carlsen is going to guard this pawn on c3 or not. And that is another very interesting moment. Now, this position occurred before in other games, and all the GMs here played pawn to c4 just to protect the pawn. And that move seemed to make a lot of sense. Now, the pawn is now guarded, it also controls the center, like a perfectly fine move to play. However, instead, Carlsen played the move bishop d3, which at first looks like a blunder and a beginner's mistake. I'm pretty sure that not many players would play this, and in fact, no one played it before. Like, I'm a grandmaster, for me, this also seems a bit suspicious, because the issue here, after queen takes c3, not only white loses a pawn, and black gains a tempo, but white actually is kind of forced to move the king and to keep it vulnerable and centralized. In this position, white can't play bishop d2 anymore, as that would hand this other bishop on d3, that's the difference. And therefore, of course, white could offer the queen trade, but white does not want that. They're a pawn down and they don't want to go to a losing endgame. Therefore, Carlsen plays king f1, and that's what makes it so controversial. White loses a pawn, loses a tempo because they have to move a king, and they end up with a centralized king. It looks like Carlsen is just violating all the classical chess rules, but that's not the end. On the next move, after black played bishop e7, Carlsen plays h4, ignoring the other opening rule, which states that in an opening you need to develop your minor pieces and castle, and you should not move your flank pawns. However, h4, in this case, actually makes a lot of sense. Since Carlsen could not castle, there is no normal way to bring this rook from the corner into play. And therefore Carlsen is getting ready to use this rook lift, and he goes rook h3. Now from here, the rook x-rays the queen, but also is ready to be brought to the g-file and to join the attack. By the way, black already needs to be careful. In the game, Duda noticed the threat and he played knight f6, but instead, if he were to play any normal developing move, just kind of careless about white's intent, Carlsen would have played bishop takes h7. And all of a sudden, this rook from h3 helps white to win the game, because now white's got this discovered attack with a check to the king and attack off the queen, and white wins the game. In the actual game, black noticed the threat and played knight to f6. Now the knight guards this pawn, and therefore black would not have to expose their king by moving it forward if white tries to sack their bishop on h7. Now what I love a lot about this game is that Duda is actually a very strong GM, one of the top players in the world, number 18 in the world, number 1 in his country, Poland. And Carlsen seemingly violates all classical opening rules, and black, Duda, seems to be playing everything right. So that makes the game a lot of fun. Now, so let's see what comes out as a result of that. Here Carlsen played knight e5 to centralize the knight, but also to open the third rank, and therefore now bishop takes h7 threat becomes real once again, which makes the queen vulnerable, and the queen needs to move. Now the fun fact is, if black tries to capture the queen with the queen, this pawn on d4, then it runs away from this x-ray, but gets right into the other one along the d-file, and bishop takes h7 would still win the game for white. That's why Duda played queen a5, putting the queen to a safer square, and now Carlsen continues with rook to g3, opposing his rook to the king, and getting ready to throw the bishop out to h6, which would be a very strong threat. In the game, black played king h8 to prevent this, but just to illustrate the idea, if black were to play any move, queen d5 or anything else, bishop h6 is really strong. Due to this pin, the bishop cannot be captured, and bishop takes g7 or rook takes g7 is a real threat. Black would have to play g6, and at this point white could either grab the rook on f8, which is pretty nice, or even to ignore it and just to keep attacking by something like pawn h5. And now white has so many attackers targeting his opponent's king that it's hard to imagine that black can survive here. In the black was still careful, played king h8 to remove the king from this potential pin, and therefore now bishop h6 is no longer an option. Black would be able to simply capture the bishop. Therefore Carlsen goes bishop g5. Now bishop g5 in general in chess is a very standard developing move, but here it actually adds a lot of firepower to his attack. Now white is ready to trade the main defender of black's castling, and after this that would enable white to throw the queen out to h5, threatening this pawn. In order to stop this, black tried pawn h6, and here Carlsen changes his mind, and instead of capturing the knight, he says, you know what, this time I'm gonna sack the bishop right here on h6 to just expose black's king. However, this sacrifice is certainly not very intuitive, because after black recaptures, there is no easy way for white to figure out what to do next. There are no straightforward checks, captures or attacking moves, and Carlsen actually played another very interesting move, queen f3, which is interesting because usually after you sacrifice the piece, you're looking for some forcing way to break through your opponent's defense and to checkmate him. But here Carlsen just plays a casual move, bringing one more piece into his attack. And what's interesting is that at this point black has been thinking for a couple minutes and ultimately just resigned. It turns out that there is no way for black to defend his position against this simple, straightforward checkmating threat of queen to f4 and then capturing pawn on h6. For example, if black were to play queen to d5 or any other move, white were to play queen to f4 hitting this pawn, and now what can black do? Now the king can't come forward and guard it because we've got this bishop controlling this square. On the other hand, if black tries to ever move this knight from f6 for defense, such as this way, now white's got a number of ways to finish the game off, but the fastest, as well as the most efficient way, is truly spectacular queen takes f7, sacrificing the queen. Now from here, the queen is ready to deliver all sorts of checkmates, but if black tries to accept it, then knight takes f7 leads to a really stunning checkmate. And I guess Duda just calculated this variation and did not want to appear in chess books as the co-author of a beautiful miniature, because usually you wish to be on the winning side of those games. But anyway, that's how the game should have finished. If you want to hone your own attacking skills, feel free to head to my free masterclass by clicking the link up there, where I share with you a few simple guideline ideas that you can follow to become a great attacking player. Either way, have a great rest of the day, and I'll talk to you soon.